Hello, 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 everyone. Hi, fans. Hi, friends. How y'all doing? It is Fantastic Friday. Thank God it's Friday. I don't know what else you can say about Friday, but I'm happy it is here. And I'm delighted that you're here with me. And we are wrapping up our Bid Academy Bootcamp. It's been a fantastic journey and experience. I would like again, I'm going to ask y'all to chat with me, but I would ask you to, in the chat box, insert your name, business name, your business email or website, so that the people in our community that we've established here, that we kind of know one another. And I'm doing that intentionally at the end so that you can see the variety and the diversity of business owners that are participating in programs like this. And then, of course, these are people that you can reach out to help increase your breadth and depth of your business network. So maybe it's not perfectly aligned, but there may be resources that you all know that you can start to share among another. So this is really self-serving for you, to you. So I expect to see this chat just start getting on fire right now. Go. While you're getting your chat message together for one another, I'm not going to go through the full introduction, but I would like for you to be warm, welcome, and attentive to our PTAC brothers that are here to make a presentation for us today. We see Mr. Terrell Knight and then Mr. Bill Cox, excuse me, are bringing information to us on how to prepare a proposal. Their slant today will be primarily on federal, but know that there's a lot of cross-cutting information that you can add there. Thank you, Michael, for putting your information up there. Appreciate you. So pay attention. This is going to be another gray matter expanding bit of information. Take notes, but know that MBAC will definitely provide you with the slides going forward. All right, I want to see you in the chat advertising your business while we turn it over to Terrell, and then he'll take it from here. You ready, Terrell?
Yes, thank you, Janine. Thank you so much to the Minority Business Assistance Center, Kimberly Director, Kimberly Gale, Janine Hooks, Business Advisor, and Sharon Francis, the Program Manager. Really do appreciate all of your hard work that you guys do over there at MBAC, and grateful to be here and a part of the Bid Academy 2020. Today, we're going to be talking about responding to an RFP. Responding to RFPs takes time and resources. The best way to make sure the effort is worth it is to learn ways to improve how to manage and execute RFP responses. Answering the RFP, which is also known as a request for proposal, is similar to submitting a business proposal with the same goal in mind to convince the potential client that your company is the right client to do business with them. An effective RFP and the reply to RFP requires precise wording and the demonstrated knowledge, and also experiencing and handling the subject matter at hand. In answering an RFP, you want to focus on understanding of the client's needs while highlighting your company's ability to answer them in an effective way. Today, we're going to have one of my esteemed colleagues, Bill Cox, go through how to respond to an RFP and the benefits of having a good solicitation. Bill Cox is the Southwest Ohio Associate Director of the Ohio University Procurement Technical Assistance Center, also known as PTAC. Prior to assuming this position in 2013, he served as the U.S. Air Force for 26 years, worked as a defense coordinator, director of operations, and business development manager. He also led the development and implementation of large information technology systems. He has more than 15 years of experience in government procurement and is certified as a level 3 program manager in the Department of Defense Acquisition Professional Development Program. Without further ado, I want to introduce to you Bill Cox. Take it away, Bill.
Well, good morning. Thank you for the introduction, Terrell, and many thanks for the MBAC for hosting this series and allowing us to present. I'm glad to see so many of you back from yesterday, and glad to see that we didn't chase you away. So with that, Sharon, if you could go ahead and bring up the slides, we'll get right into this. Okay, there's my contact information. Of course, you're going to get this presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the topics that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to spend a lot of the time in the section called Step by Step. I also kind of refer to that as what have I gotten myself into? Because halfway into writing your first proposal, that's what you're going to think of, or perhaps worse. But you'll get through it. And my objective today is to give you some tools and techniques that will help perhaps make it a little less painless. Next slide, please. Now, let me start off and kind of give you a little bit of a disclaimer. Every proposal is unique to the solicitation. So therefore, there's no one size fits all. There is some common content that you would expect to find in various proposals, but they're all a little different. And that complexity can vary based upon the size of the solicitation or the dollar value of the potential contract, what the solicitation is asking you to provide, the evaluation criteria, how the government is going to decide who wins the contract, and also the type of resulting contract. If they're awarding a contract on a firm fixed price basis, they're not going to be asking for a lot of detail in the cost or price section. If you're submitting a proposal that is it's a cost-based contract where the government's going to pay you for all reasonable and allowable costs, plus a fee or a profit percentage on top of that, then yes, they're going to want much more detail on what your expected costs are going to be. Now, as was stated up front, we're going to do this class in the context of a federal proposal, but the principles you're going to learn in here will be just as applicable if you're responding to an RFP from the state, or perhaps one from the county or a local city. Also, I make no claims that you're going to be an expert after this seminar, because it takes time, and it also takes doing several proposals. And matter of fact, I will tell you right up front that after you've done 4 or 5 proposals, you go back and read the first one you ever wrote, and I guarantee you, your first thought's going to be, was I really that bad? And unfortunately, yes, you were. But the good news is you're not alone. We were all that bad when we did our first proposal, to include me. I mean, you will learn so much by after doing 2 of them, 3, 4, 5, whatever. You will get better at this. The other thing this seminar will do is teach you some techniques that you're going to learn that are applicable, so that perhaps you can ask the right questions after your company grows and you want to start hiring people to manage and write the proposals for the bids you're going to submit. So perhaps you'll know the right questions to ask. Next slide, please. Now you need to make some assumptions up front. Number 1, Your business development and capture activities are complete. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that you've identified this opportunity, you've gone back, and if it's a recompete of an existing some existing work, you've gone back and looked at the previous contract, you know who the incumbent is, you've done perhaps some talking to some people, you've done some networking, hopefully you've met with the government, you have a good feel for whether the government is satisfied with the incumbent's performance. And if they're not, you have a good idea about what the government thinks their shortcomings are. In effect, you've done an awful lot of detective work. To include, you may have some insight into who your competition is going to be. The next step, that if you need any subcontractors, not only do you have a non-disclosure agreement in place like we talked about yesterday, but you also should have a signed teaming agreement in place. And we talked about teaming agreements yesterday. You've also, if there's been any draft solicitation documents published by the government, you've reviewed them, you've made inputs to try to modify the solicitation. And that in industry is known as shaping the opportunity. And let me stop and tell you one thing here right now from experience. If draft solicitation documents are published and you don't review them thoroughly and you don't send comments back to the government to try to shape the opportunity, to try to get them perhaps to modify the content of the solicitation. If you don't do it, guess what? Your competitors are. You bet $1 to a bag of donuts. They're making inputs into the government to try to shape the opportunity to make it more favorable to them and to make it a lot less favorable for you. And sometimes you can shape the opportunity in a good way. You can see things the government has left out, or based upon your industry knowledge, you can say, you know, my commercial customers, when they ask for this particular service, they also ask for this additional service, and here are the reasons why. And then you may find that if the government agrees with you, they may add it into the final version of the RFP or an updated draft. And oh, by the way, you've established credibility with the government. Now, I used to work for a company when I was in private industry where we would go up and have reviews of all the RFPs that we were going to bid on. And all of what's called the capture managers, who are responsible for taking over from the business development folks and forming the team and getting us ready to the point where we were ready to write the proposal, they would stand up and brief the status of the government's progress towards issuing the solicitation. And you'd be surprised what a good capture manager can find out. I would sit in the room as a division manager, and the capture managers would be briefing about an RFP that I was waiting to be released so my team could work on writing a proposal. The capture manager would tell you, here's what's going to be in the final RFP. They might even know who some of the government evaluators, who they thought they would be. They would also tell you, here's who we expect to be our competitors. And this is the technical solution each one of these competitors is going to bid. And based upon their previous proposals they've submitted, here's what price we think they're going to come in on our RFP. And it's just amazing how they can do this. And it's all from doing market research and their contacts in industry. So that's just a little segue. So you've reviewed the draft solicitation documents, and you've come up that you have a favorable, called a P-win, your probability of win. So based upon what you think is going to be in the solicitation, what you think you're going to propose as a solution, what you think your price is going to be, you think maybe we've got a pretty good chance at winning this. And I know a lot of companies, unless they had a 40 or 50% probability of win, they wouldn't touch it. And matter of fact, the company I worked for that I referenced earlier, the owner of the company had a rule of thumb that if somebody from his company hadn't had a meeting with the government program manager or the government contracting officer before the final RFP was released, and if we weren't able to influence and shape that RFP with some of our inputs, he was asking, why should we spend any more of, in effect, his money to work on this opportunity when the government didn't think enough of our company to even take a meeting from one of its employees. So those are the kind of decisions that eventually you're going to find yourself making and asking of your employees when your companies grow. And frankly, I hope y'all all grow to make have revenues in the millions and millions of dollars. So the next assumption I want to talk about is you've developed win themes for your proposal, because win themes need to be visible throughout your proposal. A win theme is a reason why the government should award the contract to your company. And typically, a company will have no more than 2 or 3 win themes for a proposal. And let me give you a little hint from having been a government evaluator and also from being the person on smaller contracts who decides who wins the contract for the government, the source selection official, as it's called. If you don't identify win themes in your proposal, don't expect the government evaluators to find them for you. They're just going to read the proposal, read it against the evaluation criteria, and say, okay, interesting, but there's nothing that grabs me here. There's nothing that makes me want to reach out and say, gee, we got to have this company do this work for us, because they've gotten us excited about what they can do. So the next assumption is you've made the decision to commit company internal funds to pursue the opportunity and write a proposal. And the last one, which we'll spend more time on later, is you have or are creating a repository of your past performance. And the other assumption that I'll make on this page is that we are talking about contracts for services. So we're not talking about price quotes. We're talking about services where you have to submit a written proposal to tell the government how you're going to provide a service. Next slide, please, Sharon. Okay, just very quickly, This entire presentation is based on a sample solicitation I got. It's several years old, about 6 years old, back when we used to use FedBiz Ops. That's eventually, this slide eventually will probably one day end up in the Smithsonian. Next slide, please. So this was a solicitation. It was issued by the Defense Security Cooperation Agency. There's a solicitation number. It was a small business set aside. There was the NAICS code that was established for it. At the time, there was a 14 million size standard. Notice the proposal due date on the 27th of January in 2014 at noon. It doesn't say 12:15. It doesn't say 12:30. It doesn't say 12:01. Let me tell you a story. And this, I was not involved with this, but there is a story that up in Washington, D.C., there was a large defense contractor that was going to submit a proposal for a kind of a medium, small to medium size contract. It was just going to be for 200 or 300 million. And it was due on a particular date. And it was due at noon. And they were located up in northern Maryland, north of Washington, D.C., outside the Capitol Beltway that runs around Washington, D.C., outside of north of I-495, if any of y'all have ever been there. And so they got the proposal finished, and they had to submit it in, I think, 3 copies, and there were multiple volumes for each copy of the proposal. They had it all boxed up. I mean, they had it ready to go, labeled, everything. And it was due the next day. And so they decided, you know, we got it all ready. We'll just get up in the morning, come on into work here at about 7:30 or whatnot, leave the office about a little before 8. No sweat. We'll be down there to deliver the proposal to the contracting officer. And the contracting officer, their facility was on the exact opposite side of the Washington, D.C. metro area down in Northern Virginia. And so that's what they did. Got up the next day, left. Soon they got on the Capitol Beltway there up in Maryland. Guess what? Major traffic accident on the Beltway. Beltway is at a standstill. Long story short, they don't make it to the contracting officer's office till sometime around 12:15, 12:20. They explained to the contracting officer what happened. Contracting officer nods very sympathetically, says, "I'm not accepting your proposal, it's late." Well, the people that were responsible had to go back and explain to their bosses what happened and why they were going to be excluded from winning the contract. And oh, by the way, the company had probably spent about almost $1 million of internal funds writing this proposal. So instead of leaving the night before and driving down and getting a hotel room just right next door to where the government contracting officer's office was located, So the next morning you could get up, have breakfast, get it there by 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. They chose to not do that, and they didn't get it submitted. So the lesson learned is plan for this. Think about it. Not only have a plan for it, have a backup plan in case something goes wrong. Because believe me, something's going to go wrong. It always does. Now, there are 3 important sections that I want you to pay attention to when you get the final solicitation. And I want you to review them in this order. The first one is called Section L, or it could be called in a request for quote, just the instruction to offers. And it will be toward the very end of the solicitation. And Section L, or instruction to offers, tells you everything you need to know about how to submit a compliant proposal. It will tell you where to submit your proposal, if it's by email, if it's by hard copy, how many copies, where it should be delivered to, the date and time that it has to be submitted. It will tell you, if appropriate, the font size of the volumes in your proposal. It will tell you the margins. It will tell you the graphics, the size of the graphics. It may even tell you if you have content on the front and back of a page, it will be counted as 2 pages. It might even tell you the page count in each volume. So everything that's in there, you need to understand. The next section I want you to look at is called Section M, or it could be the evaluation criteria. How is the government going to decide who wins the contract? What evaluation criteria are they going to use? And you need to understand that. In previous years, the government fell in love with an evaluation criteria called LPTA, lowest price technically acceptable. Now, Congress has put some restrictions on that, thankfully, I think. What LPTA actually means is that when the contracting officer receives all the proposals, he opens them up, he looks at the price that's offered, and as long as his cursory evaluation of the price passes muster, they haven't violated some basic principles of government pricing, he or she will take the lowest price proposal, give it to the evaluation team, ask them, is this proposal technically acceptable? And if they come back and say, yes, it's technically acceptable, the contracting officer will say, thank you very much. And the contracting officer will proceed to make an award to that company. And they won't even crack the cover of the other proposals. I worked for another company when I was in private industry, and I had this done to me. And let me tell you, I had spent about 16 hours a day for about 10 days to 2 weeks working on a proposal and lost because it was evaluated as the lowest price technically acceptable. And we were not the lowest price offer. And let me tell you, to hear that the government never even cracked the cover and read your proposal, well, after you've been working on something for about 16 hours a day, well, I'll put it nicely, that's a real kick in the shins. I mean, that hurts. So if you open up an RFP and you see language similar to lowest price technically acceptable, stop and think right there, especially if you know something about your competition. And if you, in general, are not the cheapest company among your competitors, think long and hard whether you want to spend any more time on this opportunity, especially writing a proposal that you probably, your probability of win, your P-win, probably just took a major hit. So think about that. Now, the last section, believe it or not, I want you to look at is called Section C, or it could be called the Statement of Work or Performance Work Statement. That has the content for what the government wants you to do. And Sharon, next slide, please. That just kind of summarizes what we talked about in those 3 sections. Next slide, please, Sharon. So, successful proposals are a process. And you will find if you're a subcontractor to a larger company, they will probably have a defined process that they will follow for writing their proposals. And you can learn a lot by learning about their processes. The normal approach is to write and review your proposal in stages of completion, giving yourself time to make corrections or additions of content after every stage of review of your proposal. Next slide, please. Now, there's no rule of thumb, but a lot of companies will use at least 4 sets of reviews. And they can be called anything you want to call them. Companies I've worked for have just used colors to describe the different reviews. But you could call them anything you want. The first review would be called the green level. And in the green level, I'm going to take all of you back to high school or middle school. And remember when you first learned how to write the dreaded term paper. The first step in that process after defining a topic was to do the dreaded outline. Well, at the green level, you're reviewing your outline. And what a lot of companies do is they will take a conference room and turn it into almost like a war room. And they will put a set of sheets of butcher paper taped to the wall. And they will put their proposal outline, write it just in marker on the butcher paper to include the major points they want to make under each one of their Roman numeral headings, just like you did when you did a term paper outline. But I want you to take it one step further. For example, if you are writing the technical part of your proposal of how you're going to perform the work, Section L may say this part of your proposal can be no more than 20 pages. You've got to decide how you're going to allocate 20 pages across the entire technical part of your proposal. So on your outline, you need to put your expectation for how much content is going to be required. Whether it's going to be 1 paragraph, 3 paragraphs, could be 2 or 3 sentences. But put what your expectation's going to be. So therefore, especially if you have other people helping you write the proposal, and you tell them you want them to do this section and this section and this section, and you point it out to them on the wall, they will see how much content you think it's going to take to adequately describe that part of the proposal. So that's what you'll do in the green level review. And you review it with the writers, and everybody agrees that yes, these are the points that we need to make in our proposal to adequately respond to the government's requirement. Then there'll be what's called a pink level review. That's when roughly about half of your proposal is complete. Then there'll be the most significant review is called the red level review. And that's after the proposal is completely drafted. And the red level review is usually the one that's most intense. And it's called red level because a lot of times, if you have some independent reviewers, they will come in with red pens. Then after you've made all your corrections from the red level review, you'll have a final level review called the gold level. And this is kind of the final check, maybe done by the owner of the company or somebody at a very senior level. And it's just a check to make sure you've made no obvious or embarrassing errors. You know, if you're addressing the contracting officer or government's program manager in the proposal, you haven't misspelled their name. Or if you have decided to reuse part of another proposal, you haven't left in the contracting officer for that particular proposal in there and haven't updated it to the new contracting officer for this solicitation. Another tip is if you have multiple writers involved, have somebody else besides the person who wrote the material review it. So this can be a good job for managers, or you can have the writer for one section of the proposal be a reviewer on some other section of the proposal. Because after a while, after you've worked on writing something, and it's human nature, and then you've reviewed it maybe internally yourself, then when you go and formally review it, you won't find obvious errors that somebody else would. just because you've looked at the same material over and over again so many times. Next slide, please, Sharon. So when you get the final solicitation, create a file for that solicitation, and any subsequent amendments that the government releases, emails from the contracting officer. If you have any questions about the federal acquisition regulation clauses, and also your draft proposal, and keep it virtually locked up under configuration control, and then create working copies that can be accessed and used by the writers. But this way you always have a complete version of the actual solicitation and all the associated documentation virtually locked up, so you always can go back to what I call the truth. Now we're going to talk on the next slide about developing and publishing a calendar for the proposal to highlight the major due dates for the deliverables that are required by the proposal. Here is another tip for you and a caution. Not every proposal volume may be due at the same time. And that because of this, this can cause multiple reviews of different types ongoing either at the same time or within days or a day or two of each other. And so this is something you're going to have to pay attention to and manage. And what I'm specifically referring to, and they've been doing a lot of this recently, is the government will say, let's say hypothetically, you're working on a proposal and the technical proposals due January 30. Well, the past performance volume may be due January 10. So consequently, you have to accelerate the production of that past performance volume to make sure you comply with that due date. So look for that in section L, the instruction to offers, like we talked about earlier. Next slide, please, Sharon. Now, this is a proposal calendar that I built for this particular solicitation. And here's what I would recommend you do. Start at the end and work backwards. Notice the RFP, the proposal was due January 27th at the very end. I put a ship date on Friday the 24th, working backwards. And notice I had Saturday and Sunday open days. Hopefully the team could rest, but those are 2 days for a last minute disaster. Because let me tell you, you're going to publish it on the 23rd and get it all assembled. I can guarantee you on January 23rd, your printer's going to fail. I can already tell you it's going to do that. Or you're going to run out of ink. Or you're going to go down to FedEx to print it there, and FedEx is going to have a problem. Or what have you. It always happens, folks. And for some reason, the computers I worked with when I was in private industry always had a sixth sense for when you were under stress and needing to get something done, and there was a time deadline. That's when they were either going to break, there was going to be a software problem, you name it. So give yourself a couple days to accommodate that. Notice we had the gold review on the 22nd, just to make sure there weren't any real obvious errors. We would print it for the gold review on the 21st. Gave myself a whole day. There were 3 days for rewrite. And notice on this calendar, Saturday and Sunday are work days. Let me stop you right here and talk about writing. Here is another rule of thumb. When you are starting out doing proposals, expect a proposal writer who's inexperienced may be able to produce about 2 to 3 pages of content today. Once they become experienced and have done it before, and especially if they have some subject matter expertise, they probably ought to be able to do at least 4 to 5 pages a day, maybe more. So one of the things you've got to do when you get a solicitation the first time, look at section L. See how big the proposal the government is expecting. Look at the resources that you have available to write the proposal. Put together a proposal calendar like this one. See if you can get from the beginning to the end with the resources that you have. If you can't, and you can't figure out where to get more resources, that may be a reason to drop this opportunity before you start spending time on putting together a proposal, and halfway through it, you come to the realization, I can't get this thing finished in time. Because remember, folks, time is money to you people. And not only that, writing a proposal and submitting it of itself doesn't generate revenue. If you win the contract and perform on the contract, that does generate revenue. But just the act of submitting a proposal, you don't get paid for it. Now, this solicitation, actually, in addition to having past performance requirements in it you had to submit, you also had to submit questionnaires to the to customers. So there are, you'll see in this calendar dates for that. You'll also see the red team review. You'll also see the green team review. Okay, next slide, please, Sharon. So when you get the RFP, after you've reviewed sections L, M, and C, I want you to take that RFP and what we call shred the RFP. Everything in the proposal that requires you to take action. And one hint is to look for all verbs or action words. Now, there are tools that you can buy that can do this. but you can do it yourself and put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and it works just as well. Not only will it tell you by doing this, you'll have a good idea about what you have to do to satisfy the contract, which you then can use that information to help you with your proposal outline that we talked about. But it also, you can put all your requirements from section L as far as what has to be in your proposal into this spreadsheet. And what you will find is by shredding the RFP, and especially section L, it's going to create a checklist for you that you can use at the end, so you can determine whether or not your proposal is compliant. You can actually go down it line by line and say, okay, have I done this? Or here was a requirement that we have to meet in the in section C in the performance work statement. Where have I talked about that in the proposal? This is a tedious and time-consuming task. I freely admit that. But what this will do for you, it will prevent you from overlooking something that's simple that makes an otherwise brilliant proposal unawardable because you've left something out. So this is just a way of protecting yourself. Next slide, please. And this is just an example of, I took this solicitation, took the RFP, I copied in bold this particular line on past performance. And then I kind of came up with 3 questions. You know, are the contracts relevant and recent in your past performance citation? Do you show the contract numbers? And then, are there points of contact with telephone numbers and relevant information shown so that the government can call on your past performance? Next slide, please. Now, let's talk a little bit about past performance. It's a common element in most federal, and frankly, you'll find it in state and local government solicitations as well. If they're issuing a solicitation for some services they want performed, they want you to tell them, where have you done similar work before? And they want to know, what did you do? What were the results? And did you deliver on schedule and on budget? So even before the solicitation comes out, you can start building a online repository of your existing work or completed contracts so that you'll have some draft ready material ready for future proposals. Now, the government will consider 2 major elements in their evaluation of your past performance. Is it recent? And is it relevant? And next slide, please. Now, is it recent? That the solicitation is going to tell you what they consider recent. Typically, it's going to be 3 years, no more than 3 years older than the date of the solicitation. Now, there is a exception for construction. Sometimes I see solicitations for the construction industry because they know buildings and facilities take a lot longer to construct, and there's not as many of the solicitations. They may allow you to go back 5 or 7 years. The second half of it is it relevant? Is it similar to the work that's being solicited and you're proposing for? So if you are submitting a proposal for IT services, the evaluation team, frankly, isn't going to care one whit about your past performance for landscaping services. Next slide, please. Now, which ones should you use? Well, first of all, remember the discussion we just had on recency and relevance. Also, look at the contract value for your past performance and how similar is it to the value that you expect to be on this contract. So for example, you're submitting a proposal for a $1 million contract. Put yourself in the shoes of the evaluation team, or in some of these smaller proposals, it could be the contracting officers that is evaluating the proposals and making the decision. Is the evaluator going to be more impressed for a past performance citation in a proposal for a $1 million contract when you're citing some work you've done previously that totaled $5,000 or $500,000? Remember a couple things. Number one, if all you have are relatively very, very small citations from dollar value or scope, the evaluators, it's going to create a big question mark in their mind. Well, how can this company ramp up to handle such a bigger contract? Do they have access to the capital? Do they have a credit line? Do they have the experience in terms of their management and their expertise? Can they hire the people that's going to be required? Because more than likely, they aren't going to have the resources in hand. So that's one set of questions. The other issue is the contracting officer, at least a federal contracting officer, under the federal acquisition regulation, and I'm sure the state has similar considerations along with local government, but a federal contracting officer is required not to put a small business into a position, into a contract where they know they're going to fail. So just be aware of that. And if that's a question you think in your proposal, that may be something you want to address in the proposal to kind of take that concern away from the contracting officer, or to at least let them know you've thought about this and you've taken some steps to mitigate or to alleviate that concern. So if you have several different contracts you can choose, I would recommend you use them in this order. Now, if you're going for a state contract, well, obviously you would move state government past performance up higher on the list. Okay, next slide, please, Sharon. Now, what should you include? Section L is going to tell you what you have to provide. But commonly what you will find that they're going to ask for is the name of the agency, or if you were a subcontractor, a name of the company that you perform the work for, the value of that work, and if it's ongoing, it could be the value to date. Who is your point of contact and their phone number? If there was a contract or task order number, the period of performance, when did you start working? When did you finish working? Or if it's ongoing, you'll have a start date and then a dash and it'll say ongoing. The point of contact's email address, and yes, they still ask for fax numbers, but I'll be honest with you, I can't remember the last time a fax number was used. So then in your discussion of that contract, they're going to know what work did you perform. Now, here is a hint for you. Take the work that you performed, and if you can, if it's appropriate, write it in terms of the work that's being requested in the solicitation. Because what you want to do is you want the evaluator to, after they finish reading your past performance citations, say, you know, we are asking these people to do these 5 tasks, and I can clearly see in their past performance, they've done these 5 tasks before. So you want to lead the evaluators to the conclusion. You also want to tell them in each example, what was the outcome and how did it benefit either the agency or the company you worked for? And then most importantly, if you had any problems or challenges and what you did to fix or mitigate the issue. I will tell you, in my 15 to 20 years of experience in government procurement, either on industry side or on government side, I can only count on about 2 fingers the times when a contract got in trouble and it was either totally the fault of the government or totally the fault of the contractor. Usually both parties had some level of culpability for a contract getting in trouble. And so you can explain that. You know, for example, you had a contract to build a certain piece of equipment for the government, and the government was going to send you some test equipment that had to be used in the building of the equipment. And they told you it was going to come in 3 assemblies that you'd have to put together to make the test equipment work. Well, you got the box, you opened it up, and lo and behold, it came out in 5 pieces. And so as a result, you had to get hold of the contracting officer. They had to get a new piece of test equipment to you. Your schedule got shot to hell, and now you're 6 weeks behind schedule. Well, through your management and diligence and the work of your staff, you were able to somehow bring the schedule back from a 6-week slip to say only a 3-week slip. So therefore you took a 6-week delay and only turned it into a 3-week delay. You're a hero. But if you don't tell them that in the citation, that you took, the government caused you a 6-week delay, and through your actions, you were able to fix that and only make it a 3-week delay, they may never know. So documenting those things, creating that past performance repository that you can use in the future is very, very important. Okay, next slide, please, Sharon. Now, in terms of past performance, the government evaluators are not limited to just the citations in your proposal. All sources are fair game. The government does keep past performance databases. The evaluator may have knowledge of other contracts you've performed on. The evaluators can contact other agencies or companies where your company has held contracts. As we mentioned, this particular solicitation had past performance questionnaires. And if there's anything negative that's found, you will receive an opportunity to explain or rebut negative information in the evaluation process. Now, here's another hint and another tip for you. As you get more experienced in government procurement and you've had contracts, invariably, you're going to have a contract that's going to fall into the category of what I call aw shucks. You know, it just didn't go well for whatever reason. And typically, it's not always just your fault. So if you have that, way back where I talked about the beginning of this proposal, that all your business development and capture activities are complete, one of those activities should have been way up front before the solicitation, the final one comes out, is you should have gone in and had a meeting with the government, and you should have fessed up. And you should have told the program manager or the contracting officer, you know, if we submit a proposal for this and you're doing the past performance of evaluation, you're going to find that we had a problem on this contract. And you can lay out the problem from your perspective. I'd be truthful, and I would acknowledge if you had some culpability. But then you can tell them, here's what we've done since then to prevent this problem from happening in the future. And let me tell you, that type of approach will go over much better versus trying to hide the fact that you hope the evaluators won't find it. And then the evaluators do find it, and an evaluator walks into the evaluation team room and says, look what I just found out about Company Z. Boy, did they screw up this contract. And it's like dropping a hand grenade in the middle of the room. So if you get the bad news out in advance, you know, everybody knows it. So then when they find it and document it, they'll say, yep, Company Z told us about that. They told us what they've done to try to prevent this from happening in the future, the steps they've put in, the processes they put in, and they haven't had any problems since then. So it takes a lot of the sting and a lot of the impact out of a bad past performance. All right, next slide, please, Sharon. After the solicitation, the formal solicitation is released. The only person you can talk to is the contracting officer. You can't talk to the program manager. You can't talk to other members of the program office, etc. And the contracting officer can make a decision whether or not they want to have a discussion with you, depending upon what you want to talk about. In section L of the solicitation, there will be a formal process specified on how to submit written questions regarding the solicitation. Excuse me. The government doesn't have to answer a question if they believe you should already know the answer. But what the government will do is they will take all the questions that are received that they want to answer, and they will publish an amendment listing the question and the answer. They won't list who asked the question. So just think about this a second. Before you ask a question, do you need to know the answer so bad that you are willing to share that answer, the question and that answer, with all of your competitors? Because that's what's going to happen once they publish the questions and the answers. So think about it before you submit a question. Next slide, please. Now we've talked about the technical volume. Section L is going to specify its content format and length. And typically your outline is going to have an introductory paragraph on the bidder. I would encourage you to put a table in up front that will have your the information that's listed here, and then the balance of the technical volume. And use the performance work statement in section C as a guide to the content. And here is another hint. Use the performance work statement and cross-reference it in your proposal, especially in a longer proposal. So you can have a section in your proposal, and then right after you have the title of the section, put in parentheses, PWS paragraph, and list the paragraph number. So that way the evaluators know this section of the proposal refers to this paragraph in the performance work statement. This does two things for you. Number one, the evaluation team, they may bring in evaluators that are subject matter experts in areas, and they're only there to review the section on the proposal having to do with one paragraph in the performance work statement. And after they review those and write up their evaluations and complete, they're gone. So number one, it makes it easy for the government to be able to see where you addressed each paragraph of the performance work statement in your proposal. Along with that, if the government can't find where you've addressed a section of the performance work statement in your proposal, well, you're out of luck. And this has been protested through the General Accounting Office, who is one of the forums to adjudicate protests against a government contract award. And the GAO has held in their decisions that if the government evaluation team can't find the content in the proposal, even if it's subsequently pointed out where it's at, If they can't find it while they're doing the evaluation, it doesn't exist. So make it easy and make it obvious for the government evaluators to find the content. The other thing that this does for you by doing it this way is when you go back and do that gold level check, you can go down and say, okay, where did I address this paragraph, this PWS paragraph in my proposal? And then you ought to be able to thumb through your proposal and find that cross-reference. One of the other things I want to foot stomp on here is tell the government not that you're going to perform the task, but tell them how you're going to perform the task. Next slide, please. Now, here's some other foot stomp points I want to make to you. Some other tips that will help you. Don't just repeat the performance work statement back to the government, known as parroting the proposal. Just don't say you're going to comply with the performance work statement. I've seen other companies will insert a table where they will list all the PWS paragraphs and have two columns that say will comply, will not comply, and then they just put a series of check marks in the comply column. Don't do that. Matter of fact, a lot of times in the evaluation criteria, the government will put something in that says parroting the proposal back to the government can be a reason for eliminating you from consideration. And what the government is doing, the government in their evaluation wants to make sure that you understand how to do the work. So let's take an example. Let's say you have a contract to the government to build them 100 little toy red wagons. And if all you do is say, we're going to build you 100 toy red wagons, well, the government doesn't know, can't tell if you know how to build a little red wagon. But if you, in your proposal, if you talk about, here's how my supply chain works to order the raw material and maybe some of the miscellaneous parts, and here's my process to manufacture the major parts for the little red wagon, and here's my process for how I'm going to assemble it, do any welding, paint it, label it, package it, etc. Then the government evaluators can read that and say, yea, verily, they have told me how they're going to build the little red wagon, so therefore I have confidence that they know how to do it. And that's what you're trying to convey to the government evaluators. You're trying to give them confidence so they'll sit back and say, we have hired a company that we are confident that they really do know how to build little red wagons. So that's why you want to tell them how you're going to do the work, not simply that you're going to do the work. Now, admittedly, this may be a little challenging in some of the latter parts of your proposal when you're discussing some less technical aspects, such as how you're going to get onto a federal installation or how you're going to handle, say, personnel security clearances, if those are required. So, yeah, there may be some times where you may be you may have more detail than others, and you may have less detail in certain sections. But once again, back in your proposal outline, you should have made allowances for that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we're getting toward the end here, folks, so hang in there with me. Now, sometimes in your technical volume, you have to provide resumes. There's lots of pitfalls here. You may have to interview the candidate. You may have to give them a contingent offer and get their concurrence to use their resume. Remember, these people who you put their resumes in your proposal, they're going to be your face to the government. Will they represent you well, even under stress? Do they get along with the government? Does the government know them? And does the government like them? Select candidates whose skills match up with the PWS requirements. So for example, if they have experiences or if they have capabilities using software tools that are used, these same software tools are used in the solicitation, highlight in their resume, you know, my web developer has got experience in SharePoint version umpty-ump. And oh, by the way, the PWS says that the government system that you've got to maintain, it was developed using SharePoint umpty-ump. So those are good things to do. Ensure your candidate agrees to any revisions made to their resume. Next slide. Now, if you have to recruit incumbents on an existing contract, this can be very risky. Sometimes it's necessary. Unless you've done this before, you may want to use a consultant to provide you what I call plausible deniability. I can tell you at one point, there was one defense contractor in Dayton that publicly let it be known that if anybody recruited their incumbents to compete against them for work they held, they would sue that company. Now, I don't know if they ever did that. I don't know if they could be successful suing. But all I know is if you are sued, you have to hire a lawyer to defend you, and that involves costs. So just be aware of that. If you are recruiting incumbents, will they give you their resume? And you'll likely have to offer them a raise from what they're getting now to get their resume. Will they be loyal to you or some other company? And if they are giving you their resume, who else are they giving it to? So just keep these things in mind. Next slide, please. Now let's talk very briefly about the cost and price volume. Read section L very carefully. It's what the government wants. Typically, it's just going to be price. Give the government the information they request in the format they request. A rule of thumb: keep technical and past performance information out of your price or cost volume, and vice versa. Content that's put in the wrong volume typically is not evaluated. If it's allowed, I would recommend you copy what's called the CLIN structure, contract line item structure, and fill in the pricing information using the same structure that the government has in the solicitation. Remember the KISS principle. Extra information is generally a very bad idea. And the government's going to use evaluators that are experts in price or cost analysis. Next slide. Now, once your company grows, and like I said, I hope you all grow to make $1 bazillion bucks. Proposals written by teams are used for larger, more complex opportunities. It requires greater control of the process and more discipline. You're going to need to probably appoint somebody to be the proposal manager, and you're going to have to empower them. And their role is to make sure the company submits a compliant proposal on time. Because this person's going to ride a herd over everybody, expect that this person is not going to be loved. And therefore, proposals are generally stressful. And as the owner, you need to be prepared to diffuse hostilities. Next slide. So to kind of wrap this up, proposals, ladies and gentlemen, are a process. You will get better as you do more of them. I can't foot stomp more than reading Section L. As you do more of these, you will start developing your own processes for doing proposals. I would encourage you to document them and refine them over time and make them better. Create that past performance repository. And like many of you getting involved in government procurement, you'll probably be a subcontractor initially and work on a few proposals as a subcontractor. That's a good way to learn the ropes before you take the leap of faith and try to become a prime contractor. And if you're a subcontractor, I would encourage you to get with the prime's proposal manager if they have one, buy them a cup of coffee, sit down for a little while and pick their brains about this process. They won't tell you any of their company secrets, but they will give you some rules of thumb, and they will give you a lot of good information that you can take forward. So with that, I appreciate your attention. I know this has been this is kind of a meaty subject, but thank you for your attention. And then I don't know if we have any time for questions.
Hey, Bill, thank you so much for the thorough and very informative presentation. I will invite our audience that to pose a question now. If there's anything on your mind that you ever wanted to know about how to prepare a proposal, now is the time to ask. Going once, going twice. Okay, I know it is Friday and I know we've had a long afternoon. I am going to ask Terrell Knight to give us just a few parting words. And then I invite my director, Kim Gale, to close out the week for us.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bill, for giving us that informative presentation. Really, really appreciate you doing that for us. Thank you so much to the Minority Business Assistance Center, Director Kim Gale, Janine, and Sharon. You all are an amazing team. So grateful to be working with you all, and so glad to be able to have the opportunity to do this with you all today. If you guys ever think that PTAC can be of assistance to your business or a guide to you and helping you understanding government contracting, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. My email address is Terrell, TERRELLK@ohio.edu. Bill's email address, here, let me pull it up for you just a second, is Cox, COXW2 @ohio.edu. Always feel free to reach out to us at any given time. We are here to help you guide through the government contracting procurement process, as well as find any set-asides or any opportunities that may be advantageous for your business. Thank you so much again for MBAC for having us here today. I hope you all had a great and wonderful time enjoying the presentation, and I look forward to working with you all closely as time progresses.
All right. Thank you, Terrell and Bill, for knocking it out the park. I know that this has been a long week for everybody, but thank you for sticking in there for us. That means that you guys are really, dedicated to your business and really want to learn more about this, how to do bids and how to get funding and capability statements. So I know it all can be overwhelming at one time, but you stuck it out. And so I would like to thank you all. I also want to thank Janine and Sharon. You guys don't know how much work they put into this process, and I want to thank all of them. I'm not going to keep you guys long. I know your lunch is overdue. So, just know that we will continue to reach out with you with the videos and the content of today. You can always go back and refer to it. And so that we appreciate all of you for participating today. And this is not the end, but in other words, you're going to keep hearing from us on different activities and webinars and education and training. And of course, you can always get your free consultation with us. Just reach out to us at any time. In the meantime, happy Friday and have a good weekend. Happy holidays and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.